Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview, where we take a look at the stories being followed in the upcoming edition of the North Coast Journal. I'm your host, Dave Frank, and I'm joined by North Coast Journal's news editor, Thad Greenson, and arts and features editor, Jennifer Fumiko Cahill. Welcome, guys.
Hey, David. How you doing?
Pretty good. Another reprieve from the rain, another sunny day. Hopefully you guys get a chance to get out and about.
It's not going to happen, on the bike ride later.
Yeah, right. Like that's a thing, right? So before we dive in and talk about what's on the cover story this week, I just want to ask give Thad and North Coast Journal a chance to respond to something that was in local media this week. Full disclosure, a small percentage of Access Humboldt's revenue comes from work we do for Humboldt County. And so with that in mind, Thad, there was a recent article in the Lost Coast Outpost that brought to light a potential ethical issue that the North Coast Journal recently published what's known as sponsored content. Thad, can you please say something about that issue for our audience, kind of set the record straight a little bit to the best that you can?
Yeah, absolutely, David. So what happened is it came to light through the Lost Coast Outpost's reporting that the County of Humboldt had contracted with the Journal to do a promotion, a survey of local employees to try to find kind of how they viewed their employers. And our editorial department wrote about that survey and its findings. We had a freelancer write the story. We did that with total autonomy, no outside influence from either our marketing department or the County of Humboldt or the anybody else. And after the fact, it came to light that in our contract, the company's contract with the county included a article, a sponsored content article is what it was referred to as. And so that's obviously a problem that we need to work out internally about how that got into the contract and how we prevent something like that from happening moving forward. You know, what I tried to tell the Outpost when they wrote about it, and what I want to stress here to our readers is that we handled this article the way we would have any normal news story. We weren't guided to write about a certain thing in a certain way or anything like that. And so that's how we handle all the stories that we pick up, is we talk about them internally as an editorial department, decide how we want to cover issues, and we cover them accordingly. And then other people read about them after they hit the paper. So I think that's the point I'd like to stress.
Right on. Well, thank you for clearing that up for us. It's something that people are, concerned about, and it's great to hear from you directly about it. So thank you.
No.
Tell us a little bit about what's on the cover of this week's North Coast Journal.
Yeah, this week's cover story is a heartbreaking piece. It's about the triple homicide that happened in the Bear River Band of the Ronerville Rancheria's reservation last Wednesday, so February 10th. For those who haven't heard the story, it's an 18-year-old stands accused of murdering three people. Nikki Metcalf, Marguerite Lee Moon, both 40 years old, who were just recently engaged to be married, and then Marguerite Lee Moon's daughter, Shelley Mae Moon, who's 16 years old. There's still a lot that we don't know about what happened that morning, but essentially there was a shooting around 8 a.m. That morning in the household, and when sheriff's deputies arrived, they found two people deceased, and then a third in kind of critical condition that they transported, and she died at a local hospital, and then two other juveniles who were unhurt, an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old. And then really quickly launched into an investigation, and were able to track down a suspect, an 18-year-old Mauricio Eduardo Johnson, who was arrested and taken into custody in Utah. Mr. Johnson, the suspect, was a family friend, was known to the family. According to the sheriff, had a relationship of some sort with Shelley, the daughter. It's unclear exactly what the extent of that relationship was, but he was very well known to this family and a regular in their household, and was a guest in their household that morning. So it wasn't as though he broke into the house or is alleged to have broken into the house or anything like that. So just a really tragic story with lots of reverberating impacts.
Yeah, this is definitely a profound tragedy. In your article, you talked to, or the three of you guys who worked on it, referenced a little bit about how the sheriff handled the situation, the investigation, and ultimately the arrest. Do you want to tell us a little bit of the backstory on that?
Yeah, there was the sheriff through its social media, or the sheriff's office through its social media channels, reported kind of that the shooting had happened, really quickly after deputies arrived on scene. They kind of posted to Twitter that there had been a shooting, or I don't think they'd said it was a shooting, but there was a death investigation ongoing. So instantly there's kind of a lot of community concern and curiosity about what was happening. And then at some point, the sheriff's office really kind of went radio silent. They identified the victims, but didn't say much about the suspect or much about kind of what they understood of what had happened. And then about I think it was the following day after the shooting, there was some social media posts that started circulating that what's called a BOLO, a be on the lookout advisory, had gone over Placer County Dispatch that described three suspects wanted in connection with a shooting, a triple homicide in Humboldt County, and gave suspect names and descriptions. And so this kind of started circulating around social media, and there was a lot of angst about why the sheriff was putting out, apparently knew this information, but wasn't kind of, people felt, being forthright with the local community. And so I was able to ask Sheriff Hansel kind of these questions directly. And what he explained, really is that they're constantly kind of balancing in criminal investigations how much information they can put out and make public without jeopardizing or harming their case that they're trying to build to bring a criminal to justice. And so in this case, he said they really quickly developed really good information, credible information, that the suspect had left the area, that this wasn't a random, breaking and entering that went wrong, or that people got shot up and there was a suspect on the loose, but this was whatever happened in that household. It was, the suspect was known to the victims and whatnot. And then quickly he was getting out of the county. He was en route to Indiana. And so they felt like there wasn't really a danger to the immediate community locally. And they could kind of, for the benefit of the investigation, withhold some information from the public locally with the hopes of making an arrest, which they were ultimately able to do. And the fear, of course, being that if they came out the day of the shootings and announced, we believe that, Mauricio Eduardo Johnson is our suspect. He's 18 years old. This is what he looks like. This is what we believe happened. It would give him and potentially people around him a chance to help conceal him, hide him, and potentially destroy evidence in this case. And so they really wanted to apprehend him as quickly as possible, and felt like kind of keeping a lid on information for a short time was the best way to do that.
Well, fantastic. Thank you for that insight. And then, so the flip side of that is the community. How was the community affected? How did the community respond?
Well, I think you're talking about as far as the people in the immediate vicinity of the family and neighbors and stuff like that. Yeah, it sounds like from what the sheriff said is that there was the investigators on scene immediately got help with witnesses coming forward, providing information, and in some of these, in some crime investigations, there can be an apprehension of witnesses coming forward to talk to the police, and they need some coaxing, or in some instances they just never do. And it sounds like in this one, people really, went above and beyond to get the sheriff's office all the information they had, and which really enabled the sheriff's office to with allied agencies, make this arrest in 2 states away within 36 hours, which is pretty impressive.
And the community is impacted just because they were so well loved in the community. I want to say a little bit about that too.
Yeah, I mean, so I think both with the Bear River Rancheria and the reservation, and then Loleta in general, they're really small, tight-knit communities. And so both Margaret and Shelley, the mother and daughter, were teachers' aides, and worked in the after-school program at Loleta Elementary School, which is just, again, a really tight-knit community. I mean, I think that Loleta has a few dozen students, so everybody knows each other in that kind of setting very intimately. And it seemed like the school community is really heartbroken and in mourning. And very much from what we've seen, the Rancheria did not get back to us with kind of an official statement, but what we've seen on social media and stuff is very similarly, that these, it's a pretty monumental tragedy. And, and I think I'm sure it's compounded by the fact that it appears anyway, based on what the information the sheriff's office has released, that, the suspect is somebody close to the family, and there is that, those potentially that abuse of trust that comes with that. And it just makes it really hard to understand and make sense of.
Yeah, totally.
It's also, I think, compounded by its context in the disproportionate number of missing and murdered Indigenous women. Thad, remind me when we ran the story about the report.
It was last fall sometime, but it blurs together a little bit.
Yeah, it really does.
COVID timeline.
But we've seen, protests and vigils in Humboldt County surrounding the issue of the disproportionate number of missing and murdered Indigenous women. And so, it's really painful to see it, happening, losing two Native women. I am so, pleased to see, and I think, that express, everyone pulling together to help with the investigation and everything else. But it's really fits into a larger landscape of a really massive issue in this country, and in particular in Humboldt County. One of the things that report brought out was the fact that Humboldt County is like basically, a hotspot for this issue. So, if you have time, it would be worth going back and checking it out. I believe this story was called "I'll See You Again in a Good Way." Is that right?
Yeah, and then it was also included in the story we ran at the beginning of the year of the top 10 censored stories of the year, or undercovered stories nationally. I think that was the top one, was the rate of missing and murdered Indigenous women.
Well, thank you, Thad and Jennifer, for insights on that. And I do remember the report, and it's definitely something worth revisiting or checking it out if you haven't already in the past issue. Yeah. Jennifer, what's going on this week in the arts and features beat?
Well, this week I went and checked out, I don't know if you've heard of this, but there's a concept called a ghost kitchen. Ghost kitchens are popping up as part of a sort of COVID survival tool for restaurants. And I wouldn't call New Americana, the restaurant or the delivery restaurant that I wrote about this week, exactly a ghost kitchen, because people know where it is. And I understand some people have been picking up from there, but it is a restaurant that started in the pandemic, but kind of built for the pandemic. And the young man who runs it, Seth Pate, is an HSU grad, and he was an economics major who worked in restaurants through his school career. And that is everything from washing dishes at the Green Lily to working as a barista at Ramon's to working at a kitchen in the former Masaki's Kyoto restaurant. So, we've got, with a heavy economics background, you can imagine he's done some thinking about the financial plan of his business. And he came up with this and started working on it sort of in September, and then found a home for it in around October, November, and opened the business to service in November. And what it is he goes in after, perhaps you recall, we talked about Chuchi's Old Town Eats, where you should absolutely go and get some of those tater tots. Our staff is addicted to them, apparently. I don't know if that's the only thing that keeps the remaining admin folks going back into the office, but the proximity to tater tots is a big deal. Anyway, so they clear out around 5:00. They're done selling sandwiches and whatnot. And then Seth comes in, and at least till the end of the month when his lease is up, Seth comes in and starts cooking. And that means cooking a very limited, but very nighttime friendly menu, by which I mean fattening food, stick to your ribs, comfort food. There are hand dipped corn dogs. There are fried polenta sticks, which are kind of like when you eat a mozzarella stick and you're like, this is not enough carbs. And then there's a Moonlight Manchego mac and cheese, which is sort of his signature dish, which I think that's all the information you need.
I gotta try it.
Yeah, and there's a vegan version too. So if you are vegan, you can still have, like, I think he has even the corn dogs come in a vegan option. So anyway, so he built this up to be just a one-man operation right now. And so he goes in there and cooks from 5 p.m. until probably around 11 when the orders stop. And then he's cleaning up and prepping for the next day, usually until 1:30 or 2 in the morning. And he does it 7 days a week, which I asked him, I was like, are you going to die though? And he said yes. And in fact, yeah, Jenny Masaki, who runs Chuchi's, occasionally says to him, okay, don't die. You know, like, it's a crazy schedule. He said he pretty much has no time for anything except, you know, walking his dog, sleeping, and going back to work. And he's not sure how long he can do it. But he's doing it in service to a longer term plan. His hope is to move to a kitchen of his own and to open up and broaden the service. Like right now with his hours and, you know, it's all sweat equity right now. So he's just maybe making minimum wage by the time he pays himself out for this. There's no minimum orders. So you can order like a $5 item and then he's got to deliver, or DoorDash will deliver it, but they'll take, you know, 25-30% off the top by the time you get your corn dog. So he knows this is not like a viable long-term plan, but he's hoping to get some investors, be able to expand, and basically have a delivery-only operation until he can have a delivery plus, you know, eventual dine-in. But the thing about his ultimate plan is he wants to have a delivery plan that's a subscription plan. So you would, for example, sign up for, I don't know, let's say a meal a week or 2 meals a month or something like that. And you'd be getting your food delivered in reusable containers that have a QR code on them. And you'd return them dirty when you get your next meal. That would cut down on waste, etc. It allows the restaurant to plan better for inventory, to be able to gauge how much they're going to sell. He might turn out right now 10 meals a night, or he might turn out 35. It's hard to know. It's hard to make sure that you don't run out. Particularly in the pandemic, it's really hard to manage inventory. You can't always get things when you want it. Which is something to keep in mind while you're on Yelp, by the way. We cannot get everything we want in a global pandemic, sidebar. But anyway, he's got this plan to do this, and it's something that he did not come up with this. He's seen it at other restaurants in San Francisco, for example, that have tried it. But there are companies that specialize in this. So they do just delivery, handling containers, doing all that stuff, handling subscription plans, etc. And then the restaurant pays them to do that, right? They've outsourced that. He would like to do it all in-house and have full control over it, which would, of course, let him keep more of the profits, and it would be more sustainable for him to do. Is it going to work? I don't know. Nobody's done it around here, right? Do we have any other subscription restaurants? If I'm wrong, please let me know. But I haven't seen one. It doesn't count as a subscription when I show up at Happy Donuts like every week. That's not the same thing. That's, I'm told, a problem. But you know, it's an interesting idea. It's an interesting plan. And if he can pull it off, you know, he was saying that he thinks that, you know, as an econ nerd, that this could make restaurants more resilient in the future. So if you've got, let's say, you know, an Italian joint, right? And every night you're worried about filling up tables. And you're also worried about, you know, if there are more people than I can fit in here, right? That's money walking away down the street. How do I turn tables fast enough? All that stuff. Some of those worries go away when you're able to do takeout on top of regular restaurant seating. And if you can do a subscription takeout plan on top of in-house, on top of all the things that involve, like, you know, people ordering a second, third glass of wine, etc., all those things that push the tab up, now you're able to make maybe more of a profit margin. At least that's his theory. So we'll see how it works out. But right now, he's got until the end of the month to kind of find a new place. And from the thing that struck me is he sort of very mellow about it. I think when my leases have run up and I've had to find a new place, it's been just like nonstop coffee and panic. But he seems fine with it. And that might be because he told me at one point that, he was at HSU. He came up from like Sonora, California. And for the first 3 months, he didn't have a place to stay. And I was like, well, what'd you do? And he said, well, I stayed in my car. And I was like, so you were one of these people who camps out, because we've written about that in the journal before. The HSU students basically living out of their cars, basically being homeless while attending college. And he said, yeah, it was hard, but he studied in the library, took showers at the gym, and cooked on a camp stove on his trunk. And he had another friend who was doing the same thing. And I was like, well, what did you cook? And he's like, well, there's a lot of oatmeal, a lot of beans and rice. And I was like, so he's not afraid of, as I said in the article, he's not afraid of roughing it or evidently, starch. And, I wish him the best of luck. And I'm really curious to see how it pans out.
Well, right on. I do think that the subscription idea is novel. And it sounds like he said he wanted to transition at some point to healthier food, which I thought was a more balanced way to approach a subscription service.
Yeah, a subscription. Yeah, a subscription has to be a little bit different, right? Because if you sign on, you have to are you ready to pull the trigger and say, I am going to have Manchego mac and cheese 3 times a month? Do you have the guts to say that out loud? Definitely to do it, but to say it out loud. So it'll be interesting to see how it works out. And I'm interested to see whether other restaurants are interested in doing the same thing.
Well, right on. Thanks, Jennifer. Thad, really quick, do you want to put in a quick plug for another article that you guys are covering this week?
Absolutely, yeah. We have a wonderful piece by Linda Stansberry, who is a freelancer for us, a former staff writer, and folks might remember she recently wrote a cover story for us about the needle exchange program in Eureka. And so this story was actually when she stumbled upon, she was talking to neighbors of Hatcher, the needle exchange outfit in Eureka, and went to the Sarah Carson house, which was the house that the Carson lumber barons lived in before they built the Carson mansion. So it's this beautiful Victorian on 3rd Street in Eureka. Used to be a bed and breakfast, and she met this gentleman by the name of Mark Tari, who purchased it in 2019, wanting to keep it a bed and breakfast, and then realized that was kind of untenable when the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden found himself with this really large, beautiful Victorian, and was trying to figure out what to do with it. And he had worked with Resolution Care, which is a palliative care outfit that provides a lot of care for terminally ill and indigent local people. And so Mark kind of realized that there was this need that when people get discharged from the hospital in Humboldt County, kind of a disproportionate number of them don't have any place to go. They either don't have home environments that are able to care for them and kind of give them the space and the respite that they need, or they don't have homes at all. They're homeless residents. And so he kind of has repurposed the Sarah Carson house, this beautiful Victorian, toward being this respite center where people can come spend a few weeks at a time after being discharged from the hospital to really get that next step of healing and kind of get their feet back under them before going home. It's a really, really nice story.
Well, fantastic. Everybody, I recommend you check it out. It really is a feel-good story. Like Thad said, it's great to know there are people like this out there. That's just about going to do it for us this week. North Coast Journal is available on newsstands now and available online. Pick one up. Stay informed, stay entertained, stay safe. Thank you guys, Thad, Jennifer. Thanks so much, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks, David.
See you next week.